This week on the Pro Wrestling Podcast, Andrade El Ídolo and Sammy Guevara's Twitter beef escalates to a backstage confrontation. Tony Khan dances around Ariel Helwani's questions about the CM Punk media scrum and MJF's contract. I take a look at the first episode of Tales from the Territories, and Matt Riddle on bringing reality and real-life beef with Seth Rollins into the storyline. I'm your host, Seth Grimes, and this is the Pro Wrestling Podcast. What's up, y'all? Welcome into the Pro Wrestling Podcast. I am your boy, Seth Grimes, here to break down another week in the world of professional wrestling. Podcast interviews. It was a big week. Lots of good interviews out there. I'm going to dive into them, as well as all kinds of other dirty news, including this story here. Just when you thought the drama was over in AEW, Andrade El Ídolo takes some seemingly unwarranted shots at Sammy Guevara. Andrade was on the Lucha Mas show, some sort of Spanish language podcast or web show of some kind, talking about his wrestling career, talking about his time in WWE, talking about AEW, and it was on the subject of AEW. He was asked about the whole backstage beef with CM Punk and the Elite, and Andrade basically said, hey, I get along with both of them. I never had a problem with Punk, never had a problem with Kenny or the Bucks. I get along with everybody pretty well, don't have any issues with anybody in AEW. And then he gave it a second thought, and he's like, well, except for this one guy in AEW, and he name drops Sammy Guevara. Check out this clip and watch for the subtitles because this is in Spanish.
Nomás tuve problema con un luchador que no... Voy a decir su nombre. Sammy Guevara. Voy a decir su nombre. Problema con él de que no sé, que entró al vestidor, de que le pegaba muy recio. Pues sí es lucha. Lucha libre. Que le pegaba muy recio y que lo golpeé mucho y de que estaba molesto con él. No, pues es lucha libre. Pues, te entregas arriba del ring. O sea, si te pego recio, pégame recio. Y ya me enteré de que enteró, que se quejó y
¿Te acusó?
Me acusó ahí como niña. Como pueden decir aquí, como niña me acusó, me enteré. Después hablé bien con él, o sea, sin pelear. Hablé bien con él, había un problema conmigo, me dijo que no. Y ya está ahí. O sea, lo hablé claro con él, sin problema, le dijo que no. No, no llegamos a más. Eso fue todo el único altercado que he tenido, yo creo que en mucho tiempo. Porque ni en WWE que dicen, que WWE ni se pega. No, pues, Sheamus es un luchador de respeto para Sheamus. Le encanta pegar a Sheamus, le encantan los golpes.
Bravo, ¿no?
Es bravo. Hasta el propio The Miz le encantan.
Sí.
Sí, ni John Cena, que luché, dijo nada. Que le pegaba fuerte. Imagínate este chavo que va empezando, pero bueno.
Yeah, Andrade just took a huge shot at Sammy Guevara, basically calling him a bitch for complaining that he hits too hard in the ring, that it's wrestling. If I hit you too hard, just hit me back. We settle it out in the ring. We don't cry about it like a little bitch backstage. And he's not entirely wrong. I'll give him that. That's kind of how I see it as well. I mean, wrestling is a tough guy sport. It is not for the weak. If you get out there, you're going to get hit. You're going to get hurt from time to time because it's not ballet. This is full contact. I'm sure Andrade wasn't trying to hurt the dude. Andrade certainly doesn't have a reputation for being, stiff with anybody, on purpose or going out of his way to be rough with anybody in the ring. Sounds like they just had a fucking rough night at the office and Sammy had a problem with it. But I don't think that needs to get handled publicly, right? There's no reason for Andrade to come out and say this in the interview and name drop Sammy specifically and basically call him a bitch. It was completely uncalled for. And not only did he do it in the interview, but he doubled down on it. And then he ended up taking to Twitter after the interview. And he said this: "I said it to your face. If you had a problem with me and you said nothing, I won't beat your ass because I'm a professional. Don't be scared. When I say something, I name names. I'm not scared to get fired. Hashtag Sammy." Of course he's not scared to get fired. He wants to get fired. He's poking the bear. Why would you even say I'm not scared to get fired unless clearly you are wanting to get fired so that you can go back to Papa H? But Sammy Guevara didn't take that kindly. He finally responded and he said this on Twitter: "You didn't say shit to me, you liar. But here's some truth, you ungrateful prick. You would be jobless if it wasn't for your dad-in-law. Are you really mad at me, or are you mad at yourself for failing to get over for a second time? Just go back to WWE like we all know you want to do and fuck off." That's good. I like that reply by Sammy Guevara. Because Andrade is a failure. He did fail to get over again, a second time. I just talked about this on last week's podcast. Andrade El Idolo he's worthless to me. I don't know. He's talented in the ring, but he's boring as all fuck to watch. He does not get over. There's nothing about him that makes you, oh, I gotta see Andrade El Idolo, unless you want to just watch a really good wrestling match, you know, with skilled maneuvering and that sort of thing. But you can see that from 100 different guys. Look, you can watch fucking Matt Seidel wrestle Jack Evans and you're gonna see some fucking shit in the ring. Doesn't mean either one of them are worth a shit, right? They're both boring as hell. They both got the personality of a doorknob. You don't want to watch them. Andrade El Idolo is boring, and he has failed to get himself over in AEW. And you could argue that he's been given a bad spot, that he hasn't been given a proper push, that he's not being used properly, and all of those things could be correct. And you could even argue in WWE he didn't get over because Vince McMahon, blah, 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 blah. You could argue all that, or Andrade just sucks. Because what has he done with the time he's had on TV? He's had TV main events. He's been on pay-per-view. It's not like he's sitting around in catering or wrestling on Dark. He has matches on TV. But what does he do with that time? And how over does he get on TV? How much do you want to see him again after you watch his match? You don't. He's boring as fuck. But the Twitter beefs were not done there. Andrade replied to that: "Okay, I'm a liar." Laughing face with the tears. "See you on Wednesday. I'll tell you to your face again. And nothing you say that you do not have any problem." A little bit lost in translation there, but we'll let it slide. We'll let it slide. And then that little stooge, Jose the assistant, had to jump in on Twitter. I don't know if this is just in character or if he's just really that big of a douche, but he basically jumped in and said that he can confirm that Andrade did say this to Sammy's face, that he was there. Finally, Sammy replied, "You're a jobber, a favor hire. Be grateful, bitch." Now look, this is not a good look for AEW. They're trying to rehabilitate their image. They're trying to reverse the idea that they have a drama-filled locker room, that it's divisive, that everybody's beefing backstage. And here we have Andrade fucking El Idolo out here picking fights with Sammy Guevara publicly. Now, I have seen some people speculate that this could be a work, that they're using social media and that they're using the idea of the divisive locker room to kind of lean into all of that and help build storylines. If that's the case, more power to them, but I don't know that it's working in the way that they would want it to if it is, right? Because all it's doing is just making the company look bad. It's putting heat on the company. It's not putting heat on the match between Andrade and fucking Sammy. So this is something that Tony's got to get control of. He's got to have a backstage meeting again or something. He's got to tell these guys to keep their fucking mouth shut about backstage drama when you're doing interviews and shit. Don't go out there and pick fights with people. Honestly, like, look, this is wrestling. Tough guys are going to be beefing constantly. It's egos, massive egos, tough guys with massive egos. They're all going to want to fight. They're all going to want to argue. They're all going to want to bitch and bicker and talk shit. It's just the nature of the business. That's never going to be controlled. As far as Andrade and Sammy goes, look here, Andrade, like I said, was in the right to begin with for saying that Sammy should have never said anything. You take your licks and you say thank you for the match. If you have a problem, handle it in the ring. But at the same time, you don't go out and you don't say that kind of shit publicly. He knew he was picking a fight when he did that. He knew he was stirring the pot. He knew he was going to cause more drama by saying this out loud. Because he not only did it in the interview, but he went and doubled down on Twitter. From as far as I can tell by the timestamps on everything, he doubled down on Twitter before Sammy ever replied. And, of course, this just blew up and made the wrestling media news all day today as I record this. It's just not a good look. Not a good look for AEW. But, yeah, and you know what? Sammy's right, too. Andrade is a failure. Andrade is not getting over. And quite frankly, I would let Andrade go. He's not one that I would be stubborn to hang on to. Malachi Black, I can see. I can see wanting to hang on to him, but a guy like Andrade or even like, Buddy Matthews is rumored to be asking for his release and stuff too. Get rid of these guys. You don't need that shit in your locker room. Not to say that they're full of drama or anything, but they clearly don't want to be there and they're going to just poke the bear and stir shit up and just be unhappy until they get their release. Malachi's a little bit different because he's a bigger star. And you don't want to send a whole fucking Radicals team over to the WWE for Triple H to sit in the front row. And of course, then he would have a match with each of them and bury them on TV. But that's besides the point. You don't want a Radicals situation where you just hand WWE a fucking 12 people to go, say that they stole them from AEW, It was already a bad enough look when Cody Rhodes jumped ship. But I expect to hear more about this before the week is out. And, Sammy, on the other hand, too, I kind of been favoring Sammy here in this situation. But look, Sammy's been getting himself into a lot of beefs backstage all of a sudden lately. Andrade, fucking Kingston. I guess it's not a lot, but it's more than anybody else is having, so knock it the fuck off. He needs to put his ego in check too, but he's young and he's green and he's kind of a punk ass. So that'll come with just growing up and being wiser in his years. But what a mess. What a mess for Tony Khan to clean up. But what a bunch of sweet, sweet tweeting entertainment that we get to enjoy as wrestling fans. And we have an update to this story. As you know, things escalated when the two met backstage at AEW Dynamite. Andrade El Ídolo asked to go home after reportedly taking a shot at Sammy Guevara, possibly a couple shots. TMZ initially broke the story saying that both Sammy and El Ídolo were sent home and that both Sammy and Andrade were throwing punches at each other. But since have been many other stories come out, other people backstage, all pretty much saying the same thing, that Sammy Guevara did not hit Andrade back, and that is why he did in fact not get sent home and was in the main event of Dynamite along with Chris Jericho and picked up the win. Well, I'll be damned. Take a look at this clip here from Alvarez and Uncle Dave on the latest of this backstage confrontation.
Andrade's trying to get fired. Okay, we all know that. And so far, when guys want to leave, some will go to great extremes to do that. It's happened with WWE. I've talked to people in WWE who've tried to get fired with some of the craziest things in the world. And I've told them, look, it's not going to work. And there were some crazy stories of people trying to do things to get fired. Now getting in a fight was never one of them, but there's things much crazier than that. So now the situation is on the other front where there's a few people, and it's not that many. It's like 3, right? That want to leave, and there's different stories and whatever. And Andrade's one of them. And, has basically said it, publicly in that interview,
He essentially talked about the mask versus career match at the show that was scheduled for Friday. And he said, maybe I'll just lay down.
I guess when I was covering the Twitter beef, I should have saw this coming, right? This was the next logical conclusion, that they were going to take physical shots at each other once they get face to face. Especially because it is pretty well known at this point that Andrade is looking to get fired. He basically said in that interview, he stays in touch with Triple H, and that he, was going to possibly lay down, or was going to before that match was canceled, in his career match against 10. Dude wants to leave AEW, and quite frankly, I don't need to see him on my TV, but if you let him go, as Alvarez had said on his show, and Jim Cornette, I feel, has said the same thing, that if you let him go because he threw a punch at somebody, that's going to send the message that all you have to do if you do want to get out of your contract that you sign is just punch a motherfucker, like a Malachi Black or a Buddy Matthews. You just walk up and punch somebody backstage and they'll get fired. This is, on one hand, you want to, I want to say just fire everybody. Let everybody go that wants to leave, I've said that before, but at the same time, you don't want to hand the WWE any of those guys, especially all of them, you know what I mean? You don't want to hand them their own version of the Radicals, so you got to be careful. Though Andrade is he's not going to draw a dime anywhere he goes, and neither is Buddy Matthews. Malachi Black will. But Matthews and Andrade, they're just not needed. And Andrade's going to start doing this shit now. I kind of like Cornette's idea, actually, which is just sit them home for the remainder of their contract. Cool them off. Pay them to sit home and do nothing. And then that way they will be significantly cooled off going into WWE. There will be zero hype. And I haven't even seen this guy in a couple years. And that could be the best way to handle it. I don't know what else you do at this point. If Andrade is dead set on leaving AEW, and he's going to outright defy the rules, right? Because Tony Khan reportedly reached out to both Sammy and Andrade on Tuesday before they even came to the show to say, hey, when you guys get here, I don't want to see any funny shit, right? And they both agreed, no, we're not going to fight. Don't worry about it. And what's the first thing that happens? Andrade takes a shot at Sammy. Sammy, I guess, didn't. He was restrained, held himself back. I see a lot of hate for Sammy Guevara online because he seems to be the common thread in a lot of these backstage altercations. Maybe he's just young and cocky, runs his mouth too much. But Andrade just strikes me as kind of a douchebag. He's unprofessional at the very least. There's zero professionalism in going about your business like this. It's just not the way to handle it. Maybe sitting at home on the couch doing nothing. Earning a paycheck, yes, but doing nothing might be the best way to resolve it. But what do you guys think? If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and let me know down in the comments. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the next clip. Tony Khan was on the Ariel Helwani show this week, doing his best to dance around all of Ariel's questions. Like I had said last week, Ariel Helwani is one of the best interviewers out there, and he plays hard too. He will ask tough questions. and he asked all the tough questions to Tony Khan. He asked about MJF's contract. He asked about the CM Punk media scrum. Not only the status of CM Punk, but also just what was going through his mind at the media scrum when he was sitting there just watching all this happen in real time. And try as Ariel may, he kept asking, he kept finding different ways to ask, but Tony Khan, like a goddamn ninja, was just dancing and ducking and dodging and maneuvering around all of his questions. Check out this clip.
What was going through your mind at that press conference Labor Day? I mean, I was just trying to watch you as Punk, who I know quite well, was, saying what he had to say. I was dying to know what was just happening in your mind in that moment as all that was unfolding. Could you share any of that with us?
I cannot share any of that with you.
Okay.
But I
were you
understand
upset?
What you asked. I can't talk about it, but I appreciate, and understand that you had to ask.
Fair enough. Could I ask, what is the state of your relationship with CM Punk?
You can ask, but I appreciate that you asked, but I cannot answer that, my friend.
Okay, fair enough. Could I ask, what's the state of his relationship with AEW? Like, is he going to come back? Is he suspended? I think there's a lot of intrigue, a lot of questions regarding where he sits right now. I know he's nursing an injury, but is he going to come back, or is that up in the air?
You can ask, but I cannot answer that and comment, my friend.
Fair enough. And what about the other particulars involved in the alleged incident afterwards? Can you comment on their status with the company? Are they back at least?
It's the whole thing. I just
the whole thing.
Talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I
understand. I had to ask.
I understand what you got to do.
Like, the reason why I'm so drawn to MJF is because he talks about this side of the game. You're a football guy. We love the business side of sports, right? Free agency, transfers, deals. This, I think, is brilliant. So I'm just curious, why don't you want to talk about it? Like, why? This, I think, is part of his appeal, and I think it's great for the storyline, his spot in the company. He's going to be a free agent in a year and a half or so, and you're talking about it on the broadcast as well.
Yeah, but I don't see how going into detail about it, other than talking about his wrestling and what he brings to the show, and of course, everything he brings, his great promos, his great ideas. There's a lot there, but I think you're starting if you want to get into the contracts and that aspect of it with me. Same as my other jobs. If you wanted to talk about the contracts at Fulham, I would probably be kind of vague. I would say, I really like the player. I think it's good business we're doing, and I think it's a great transfer that we're making, and we're doing a smart move for the club. But you getting into the numbers and stuff. Rarely will I do that.
When he was on my show, he just said that he came to terms with you on a deal, but not an extension. Can I ask if that was accurate?
Yeah, I don't want to comment on what we did, but I think he's been well compensated, and I'm glad to have him on the shows, and he's like a huge part of it now. So it's great.
I understand the fact that Tony can't really answer those, especially if there is an ongoing legal issue with especially the CM Punk situation. But at the same time, why take an interview? He spent this entire time taking every question that Ariel asked to transition it into putting over his talent or hyping up his roster or hyping up a show or a match. He just kept, Ariel would be like, so, tell me some details about MJF's contract or whatever. And Tony Khan would be like, well, I can't answer that, but, MJF's a great talent. He's on the roster. His win-loss record is blah, 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 blah. He's beaten more guys than anybody. He's in the number one. He's a great draw for the ratings. And he just goes, you gotta, he's hard. You gotta almost jump in and cut him off. It's like you ask him a question, the dude goes off for 10 minutes straight. Just fucking, he's such an uber nerd, a numbers nerd, a fucking math nerd. He'll just read you stats. It's like, oh, how's the weather today? He's like, well, in 1953 the weather changed in the cycle, and then the stats and the ranks and the blah 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 blah. The dude goes off, man, and this was almost it was almost cringy bad. It was almost, this was the worst Ariel Helwani interview I think I've ever seen. And it's not for Ariel. Ariel tried his damnedest, but he got nothing out of Tony. Tony was a fucking steel trap. And like I said, I get that. And even from a business perspective, I get wanting to keep a lot of that tight under wraps. But at the same time, like, you are in an interview with a guy that asks tough questions. You have to come to the table with something. Nobody wants to listen to your goddamn Ariel Helwani interview to hear about how fucking, FTR is one of the greatest tag teams on their win-loss record, and, they've won this championship and that championship. It's like, ugh, stop. I didn't even ask you that question, dude. I asked you how the weather was, and you fucking just chill, bro. There was a lot of fascinating tidbits that you could pull out of this, though. He went into more detail about how he books his show, that he basically is the guy that comes up with the outlines for this, and he's coming up with ideas, that he runs stuff by people, but he doesn't really have any kind of team or anything like that. And he talks about that he wants to, he's working with Warner Media to try to get a weekly show for Ring of Honor, and that Warner Media was impressed by the recent Ring of Honor pay-per-views, so they're kind of going off of that. They want to see a little bit more, so he's going to have to kind of keep, maybe do another pay-per-view or two to really kind of show a proof of concept that Ring of Honor is something that people want to watch. This is also, he kind of basically explained, this is why all the Ring of Honor titles are on AEW now, because Warner Media is watching, and he wants to expose Warner Media to the Ring of Honor, some of the Ring of Honor talent, the key talent, the championships, those kind of matches. He just kind of wants to familiarize Warner Media with that more than even the fans. So all the fans out there complaining that there's too many titles, and why do you even have this Ring of Honor belt on a AEW show? It doesn't make sense. Well, that might be true. I might say that in a bubble. But this kind of goes to show that we don't always know the greater picture. Because they do have that partner in Warner Media, and maybe Warner Media specifically wants to see some more of Ring of Honor as proof of concept. So Tony doing these things is more than one purpose, and it's a greater cause than maybe some of us understand at the time that we're watching. A lot of other little fun tidbits, he talked a little bit more about the football league and that sort of thing. Talked about his dad, Papa Shad Khan. It was it's always fascinating to hear from Tony Khan, especially when you get a good interviewer in there like that can ask. Because a lot of times these days, especially when you get an interview with Tony Khan, it's almost exclusively just babble about his stats and all that nonsense that I was talking about earlier. It's hard to get really good shit out of him. And I feel like Ariel got what you could out of Tony. He was just being a steel trap about a lot of other stuff. But, he did open up a little bit more about the WWE stuff. He did admit to having a conversation with Nick Khan and kind of taking the tone that he was not that big of a fan of Nick Khan, that he didn't really like him. But of course, when Ariel asked him to elaborate on that, Tony Khan wouldn't elaborate on that anymore either. Literally none of the juicy stuff he was able to talk about one single bit. But that one's interesting too, and I wonder if that plays into how Tony Khan's been out there talking about how WWE did him dirty or doesn't respect them, or he just gets bad, a vibe from them that they're not too friendly towards him. Maybe that came from some sort of meeting conversation he had with Nick Khan. So they never met him in person, but maybe some sort of phone conversation perhaps. Who knows? But that's about as much as you get out of this interview. I do recommend checking it out. For those details that you are able to get out of Tony Khan. But this is going to frustrate you just a little bit, I could tell Ariel was getting frustrated too. And even Tony was getting frustrated by the questions. He kept kind of repeating, he's like, you can ask, but I'm not going to answer. And Ariel would be like, okay, how about this? And Tony's like, you can ask, but I'm not going to answer. And Ariel would, bless his heart, he kept trying, he kept trying to find different ways to get any kind of detail at all. He would ask the question in a different way or whatever. So bless his heart, but this was kind of a bullshit interview with Tony Khan. And but go out of your way to watch it anyway, just to kind of see the train wreck that it is. And I will catch you on the next clip. Bro, Matt Riddle was on After the Bell this week with Corey Graves. Matt and Corey talked about Riddle's time in the UFC, coming over to the WWE, his tag team with Randy Orton, and his current feud with Seth Rollins. And it was in this part of the conversation where Corey asked Riddle about bringing in the realism, bringing in the real life stuff, the stuff about Riddle's wife and his kids. And this is what Matt Riddle had to say, his real life beef with Seth Rollins. Check out this clip.
Seth's an amazing opponent, and I'll be honest, this is good for both of us because I don't think neither one of us like each other that much and never have.
Right. I've brought that up here, all the details, obviously. I didn't want to speak out of turn, but that was a pretty well-publicized issue when you first arrived. Was it on Raw or in WWE as a whole? You guys didn't get along too well.
Didn't get along too well. He wasn't a fan of me, and I was this. I wasn't not a fan of his. But somebody close to me at the time made some comments, this, that, and the other thing. And Seth wouldn't talk to me. Seth wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't talk to me. He wasn't going to have anything to do with me. And eventually, kind of like Brock and everybody else, you don't have a choice. I'm here. I'm going to keep working hard. Eventually, you're going to have to get in the ring with me, and we're going to have to do business. And eventually, Seth came to that conclusion. But I think he also realizes what I bring to the table, what I'm willing to do to get reactions from the crowd. Just like, when we go personal, we talk about things we probably shouldn't be talking about. But I'm like, bro, I don't care. I mean, I do pay child support. Things are rough for me. And for me, I honestly look at it as more of a therapeutic thing. Anybody that knows me knows what I'm going through. And they're like, I can't believe if he would have said that to me if I was going through that. Because everybody that's been in that spot, in that moment, can relate.
As long as you have the ability to keep things professional and you can work with each other, I think there's no problem with people that have real life heat with each other, or just maybe not heat, maybe that's not even the right word, but just don't like each other. I feel like as long as they're both professionals, you can really get a good storyline, a good angle out of pairing two people up like that. Getting them to work with each other, bringing in some of those real life issues, touching on the real life stuff. Even when it going as far as hitting home with Matt Riddle's family, his divorce from his wife, paying child support to his kids. Like, that was a big deal for Rollins to go there, but, Riddle, he's cool with it, because he says part of it's therapeutic, and I can understand that because wrestling is art. It's not real life. Seth Rollins not bringing that up to Matt Riddle, the person. He's bringing it up to Matt Riddle, the character. Playing off that real life stuff just makes the angle that much more believable, makes you that much more invested in the story. Look at some of the greatest. Remember the Matt Hardy and Edge feud over Lita? How fantastic was that? And those two were the utmost of professional, working with each other when they hated each other. And they were legit beefing over a girl. You ever have a guy steal your chick? Or your chick cheat on you with like a friend of yours, or just anything like that? Just imagine now having to do a fake fight for all intents and purposes. And if you watched those matches, there wasn't a lot fake about it, There were some heaters being thrown in those matches, some stiff ones. But to be able to go out there and be professional and work with each other and create that kind of magic in the ring, to bring it to the show, to put it in the ring and leave it all in the ring, and work, the competition becomes, can I outwork you? What can I get out of you in the ring? in a match, and they're going to push each other, and things are going to get physical in that fight pit thing that they're doing, Riddle said he's going to make Rollins bleed, and I know Triple H just recently said that he basically has like a no blood policy. He doesn't see any reason to do that any further, but they might just outright have a real fight. Maybe, it could be worked a little bit, but it could end up being like one of those Pancrase gimmicks or something like that. I'm sure Riddle would be down for it. It would kind of depend on if that's something that Seth would be willing to do. You know what I mean? But I would expect to see some live rounds being thrown in that one, and that one to be a little bit stiff and physical. But it's interesting to hear Riddle's perspective about it and just how professional that he's being about the whole situation and his willingness to work with Seth, to work through this and bring his real life struggles into the angle on live TV. So great interview. I suggest you go check that one out as well. It's going to be After the Bell with Corey Graves and Matt fucking Riddle. Bro. We got the very first episode of Tales from the Territories, the new show on Vice TV from the guys behind Dark Side of the Ring and The Rock's production company, $7, putting together a very similar show to the Dark Side of the Ring, the Tales from the Territories. What they're doing is they're doing this round table gimmick where they're taking a group of guys from all of the major territories, and each episode is a different territory, and these guys are just going to sit around a round table. They're having drinks, they're having cigars, and they're just talking about the good old days, the glory days. They're telling their tales, the stories from these territories. Stories from the territories. I'm a rapper, rapper. What the fuck am I talking about? And this first episode was on Memphis, and this was just a fantastic show. They do the reenactments just like Dark Side of the Ring. You can tell it's made by the same people. It's got a very, very much the same kind of look and production value with the reenactments, and then even just the filming of the roundtable interview itself. It's in like this dark warehouse, and you can see like the shadow of a fan spinning on the ceiling. And you can just tell it's got that like grit of the Dark Side of the Ring. But this is a little bit more lighthearted, not so much, because in this particular clip, easily could have been a Dark Side of the Ring episode. We hear Jarrett, of all people. Chicken salad, Jarrett. He's talking about gouging a motherfucker's eyeball out in the middle of the ring. Did this even actually happen? They said it did. Check out this clip.
Thing is, because they got to be close to you to hurt you. Stick your finger in your eye, you'll feel a little cord, move it to the left and pull out. They'll usually quit fighting when you do that. The plan was that I would get humiliated on TV by him knocking me out. I jumped up, my finger went in his eye, and he lost his eye. But then the story gets worse. Oh, worse than that?
And while the truth of that story is still up for debate, it hasn't been fully debunked. Nobody's come outright and said, no, that didn't happen. And I do believe that fellow did in fact lose an eye at some point in time. It's just hard to picture Jarrett of all people. But I guess, even in his day, he was a worker and fancied himself some kind of tough guy anyway. I think he was a working promoter. He was in the match at the time, or in a match, and he got hit on the head. I feel like that's a bit much if a guy clunks you from behind. He's not supposed to just, okay, I'm going to gouge his fucking eye out now. But hey, it's the territories. It was the wild days. And, there's a lot of people who are like, no, that could never happen. And, police would be involved and yada, yada. Not so fast, because the territory days were the Wild West like that. Those guys weren't like, that guy's not going to go just, call the cops, he ripped my eye out. Wrestlers rarely got cops involved, though I do actually think that guy did call the cops at some point, but it wasn't about the eyeball. It was about something different, but that was a rare occasion back in the day, because wrestlers didn't want to get cops involved in the business, both because wrestlers were usually just up to no good in general, doing dirty stuff, riding dirty and such, but also just because they didn't want to expose the business. If you say somebody hurt me for real, well, then now you're saying that it's supposed to be fake, because otherwise, if you're keeping kayfabe, then the cops are going to be like, well, yeah, he attacked you. That's what you guys do. Don't you beat each other up all the time? It's wrestling. That's what you do. So this was kind of a unique situation, and this is just a fantastic show. Just being a fly on the wall to listen to these stories. And it was heavily edited. You could tell, they're trying to keep it to the hour, half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it is. This thing is 40-some minutes with commercials. It would be an hour on TV. They did drop the full first episode on YouTube, which I have linked below in the description. So go check out the full episode if you like, and I highly recommend it. This was just fantastic. As good as any Dark Side of the Ring episode, as entertaining, maybe even more so in different ways. Memphis was a fun territory to just listen to the stories about. Yeah, Jerry Lawler, Jerry Jarrett, Jeff Jarrett, Dutch Mantel was there. And I'm kind of blanking on maybe who else was sitting around the table there, but just them alone, just what a bunch of stories that they were able to tell and put together. And I just love the concept for this show. I'm excited to see what other territory stories that we're going to get from these other territories and some of these other guys that were involved with these. We are going to get another episode with the Memphis crew, as the boys from the Dark Side of the Ring have already explained that during the sit down for the Memphis episode, they got into talking about the Andy Kaufman story, as I talked about last week, and that they talked so much about it that they got a whole separate episode's worth out of that and felt like it was worthy of its own episode rather than just being tagged on to this Memphis show. So great shit. Go check that out. Highly recommend it. Dark Side of the Ring, Tales from the Territories. Love these shows. On to the next. Sean Oliver was on Fightful this week. Sean Oliver, of course, the host of Kayfabe Commentaries. If you're not familiar with Sean Oliver, or you haven't seen the Click This podcast yet, you're missing out. Sean Oliver is absolutely one of the greatest interviewers in wrestling. He's got such a way of just pulling out these fun stories from people. He's got a little bit of snark to him, a little bit of smartassery. He's heard the worst of the worst stories. He's heard it all. You know what I mean? He said when you sit down and you do a deep dive interview with Sonny alone, you're gonna have to go get shots or something. You know what I mean? But it was in this particular clip, he sat down with Sean Ross Sapp this week from Fightful, talked all about all of that, the kayfabe commentary stuff and the whole story behind that and the come up of that, how that became popular, some of the books that he's written, and just some of the more wild stories that he's come across by doing those types of shows. But it was in this particular clip here that we got the origins of the Click This podcast with Kevin Nash. Check out this clip.
I was so happy to hear that you and Kevin Nash were doing a podcast together, because you guys are my favorite interview combination of all time.
It was people like you, Sean. It was fans that, I always enjoyed the shows. Kevin obviously enjoyed the shows. He was willing to do them for next to nothing, which he doesn't do.
Yes, I know.
But people would talk, and we would consistently see over the years, while Kayfabe Commentaries was still very active, people would request it and enjoy it. Then, even after that, it continued. The words that were thrown around were chemistry and all this stuff, the impossible things to prove. They just wanted to hear me and Kevin talk. Well, he was talking. I was mostly asking questions. It was 2018, I guess, when he said, well, let's do a podcast. So after a few false starts, we talk about it. I'd get random texts at 2 a.m, like, me, you, podcast, call me tomorrow. He said, it's now or never. There's just too many out there. We're going to have to do this. So I said, if we're going to do it, it's going to have to be a commitment. We're going to have to do it the right way. It's going to have to be a real deal for people. It's going to have to be a reliable thing for folks. And that was it. And we were off to the races, and we went 100 miles an hour.
I hadn't really known the extent of Sean Oliver and Kevin Nash's friendship or chemistry on camera. I'm sure I've seen their shoot interviews before, but never really, it's been a while. But I was so pleasantly surprised to see Sean Oliver pop back up when I saw that Kevin Nash was going to be doing a podcast and doing it with Sean Oliver. Because like I had said earlier, I came up as a wrestling fan watching these kayfabe commentaries. This is where I got some of my deep education. These were out before podcasts were, really, before there was these Something to Wrestles, and really before there were any podcasts doing any kind of insider deep dives into anything going on behind the scenes. Kayfabe commentaries had all kinds of great stories from all kinds of top guys, mostly from the 80s and the 90s. They were the guys that are on the convention circuits and in indies, and never anybody contracted currently or anything like that. But he did the kayfabe commentaries. He did the timelines where he would just take a full year. He did guest booker where he had wrestlers come on, or old bookers come on and kind of rebook the territory a little bit. Just great shit from Sean Oliver. Like I said, he's a fun interviewer because he's got such a way of being able to play off of the most ridiculous of stories and situations. Nothing phases him. He's not gonna be shamed. He's not gonna be embarrassed. He's not gonna be caught off guard or offended by anything. You can hit him with pretty much anything that you got, and he's gonna straight face it and have some sort of snarky, smart ass reply to it. He's just great. He's just a fantastic interviewer. So I highly recommend, if you have not heard much of Sean Oliver, go back and check out this interview on Fightful with Sean Ross Sapp. I have linked it in the description below. And if not, at least check out the Click This podcast if you haven't yet. Kevin Nash, also very personable on there. Kevin Nash is a great guy to listen to. He's smart. He's educated. He's well-spoken in between F-bombs. Never afraid to speak his mind at all. And they often get way off track and talk about a wide variety of other things than wrestling, which can be pretty refreshing at times. Give or take. Some of their political conversations I could do without, but other than that, they're just fun to listen to. It's a good combination, a good pairing. And so I highly recommend it. And with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next clip. Dan Lambert, officially done with AEW, at least for now. Dan was on the Insight podcast with Chris Van Vliet this week, talking about his time in AEW and his wrestling fandom. The dude is a huge wrestling nerd, like a mark, just like we are, just as marky as we are. Apparently, he's got a massive championship belt collection. I had heard that he was a belt collector. I didn't know to the extent. I think he said he's got 100 belts. I think he said all ring used, not replicas. He said any territory you can think of, he's got at least one belt from that territory. I'm jealous. I'm a huge belt mark. I want some fucking belts. I want to be a belt collector. I wish I had that kind of money. I don't know where he gets all his money. Is it just from running American Top Team? Do you make that much money running a fight camp like that? I guess so. He talked a lot about that and the UFC and some of his fighters and that sort of thing, but it was really interesting hearing him talk about his wrestling fandom. And then he was asked by Chris Van Vliet, are you technically still with AEW? Because we have not seen him on TV in a little while. And this is what he had to say. Check out this clip.
I can't tell you how much fun I was having. It was like the coolest thing ever.
Are you still working with AEW?
Not now. About maybe 2 months ago, we finished up our feud with the Men of the Year and Scorpio Sky against Wardlow, and Sky dropped the belt to Wardlow. Sky was going to take a couple months off because he had a knee injury that needed to heal, and Paige was getting repackaged to doing what he's doing now with the firm and the work with MJF. So I just thought that was a good time that, seemed like it was winding down. I felt like I was getting stale. Even though the reactions were still good, it was still fun. But I just grabbed Tony after that show and said, "Yeah, I think it ran its course. I don't want to go backwards or overstay my welcome. So I think that's gonna do it for me." And he was like, "Oh man, sure, whatever you want. If maybe we come up with a good idea and you come back in the future or something. Yeah, sure, whatever. Call me."
You could pop back up at any point, really.
I mean, hey, if Tony called me tomorrow and said, "Hey, I got a good idea. Do you want to do it?" and it was a good idea, I'd say, "Sure, why not?"
It's good to see that Dan was able to realize that his storyline was kind of running its course at that point in AEW. He had massive heat by the fans for a long time. He was sort of the surrogate for Jim Cornette in a lot of ways, right? Everything Cornette was saying on his show were the kind of things that Lambert was saying on TV. And according to Lambert, he feels a lot of those things. He's an old school wrestling fan, late 70s, early 80s, same era that Cornette was a fan of. He grew up on a lot of that territory stuff. And that's what's real to him, damn it. Not all this flippy floppy stuff that we got from these kids today. So a lot of that, he admitted the stuff that he was saying was kind of real. But he's still obviously a giant fan, still loves the business, still overjoyed to be involved. He talked about his match with Chris Jericho or being involved in that team match or whatever on pay-per-view. And just talking about like he always dreamed of being able to be a wrestler, he said, who doesn't want to be a wrestler? And to be able to wrestle with Chris Jericho on national or on pay-per-view even. That was a big treat for him, and just, all the things involving his fandom. But he's right, his character ran its course on TV, and it was starting to get go-away heat. The heat that he was getting was starting to turn into, oh, God, not this guy again. And he was smart enough to kind of see that and bring it up to Tony like, hey, I'm going to mind if I step away for a little bit. Now, he said he will come back if there's anything good, fresh, unique presented to him. Just what he was doing at that time ran its course. Plus, he said Scorpio Sky, if you've been wondering where he's at, is out with, he had like a surgery or something. So he had a little bit of work done and then probably going to be recovering for a while. So that's kind of why that whole American Top Team angle went away. And probably a good thing it did, because it definitely was running its course. But I like Dan Lambert. I like the Jim Cornette wannabe character, the surrogate for the Jim Cornette. There's nothing wrong with that character, because it's going to get good heat from the fans. But you want to use it sparingly or use it at the right times. And I'm sure he'll be back in wrestling. I'm sure of it. It's just finding that right thing that suits him, and when he does come back in, I'll be excited to see him, and hopefully he doesn't get to the point where it's kind of annoying again, right? That's it, folks. That's all I got for you this week. Thank you so much for hanging around and checking out the whole show. I appreciate you more than you will ever know. Please interact with me. If you're watching on YouTube, throw me a comment down below. Let's have a chat there. Throw me a follow on social media. If you're on TikTok, Facebook, or Twitter, I'm going to be at Seth Grimes Media. Find me there. Follow me there. I will post other stuff besides the shows and stuff here, so you can pop in over there for bonus content. Also got lots of other content here on the YouTube channel, including a reactions playlist. Same channel, just check out my playlists and scroll on down to the reactions playlist. And there you're going to see all kinds of different reactions, from music videos to movie trailers and everything in between. Lots of fun stuff on there. There's something for everybody. I'm sure you'll find something that you like that you might want to hear my reaction to. So pop on over and check that out if I could bug you to do that. Also, I got a book out. If you're on Audible at all, or if you just like to read paperbacks, you can grab it on Amazon or Kindle if you're a tablet reader. It's The Gathering, a bold journey into the belly of the Juggalo underworld. It's about a dude who hates juggalos going to the gathering of the juggalos. And there's lots of drugs involved, and there's police involved, and it's just fun. It's funny. It's a crazy story. You don't have to be a juggalo or anything like that to enjoy it. It's just a fun story about a kid going to a music festival, and all kinds of craziness ensues. Finally, I do have pro wrestling inspired NFTs. They are championship belts, all your favorite championship belts, big gold, the $1 million title, the WWE logo one, the hardcore title even, all of them, all of your favorite championship belts, mashed up with all of the top cryptocurrencies. So the WWE ETH championship for Ethereum, have the Bitcoin championship instead of the $1 million champion. It's a B $ instead of the S $ as they do for the Bitcoin, for the money thing. Lots of fun stuff there. You can check those out. Links in the description below. That's all I got for you. Thank you so much for checking it out. I appreciate you endlessly. Thank you for being ride or die as I continue to try to grow this channel, grow this podcast. I'm going to be here for weeks and years to come, and I hope that you stick with me. Peace, love, and pizza. I am your boy, Seth Grimes, and this has been the Pro Wrestling Podcast. Ow, I strained my neck.
I hate juggalos. I fucking hate them. I say all this with a grain of salt because for a good part of my own life, I proudly identified as a juggalo. You should come to the gathering with me. Nah, man. I'm not in all that whoop shit anymore. I'll pay for your ticket. I got fired today. Get the fuck out! Still got room for me? Spike, slow the fuck down! Cops!
Fuck your sleep. Fuck your sleep. Fuck your sleep.
The savages started closing in with their tiki torches and war paint. Shit. Run! You guys got a dead body here already? Even the aliens were throwing shade. It was pure panic and intense horror. There was a guy I saw got chopped in half. I had nothing left to go back to. You alive? Yep. The Gathering. A bold journey into the belly of the Juggalo underworld.